Ever wish you could get some of the complex flavor of sourdough without the full commitment? Let me show you the magic of a Poolish, a simple pre-ferment that gives you soft, flavorful bread with minimal yeast and a lot of flexibility. Let's get started. Hi friend, come on in. Today I wanted to introduce you to an alternative but similar method to sourdough in case you don't have one. And while this does work with sourdough, today I am working with regular yeast, making this a very versatile technique. A Poolish is a pre-ferment. It's a way to take a small amount of yeast and let it ferment a portion of the dough ahead of time. This adds flavor complexity and improves the texture of the bread, but without the tang of sourdough. You get better flavor with less yeast and no need to maintain a starter. My Poolish today will use 150 grams, about 1 cup of flour, 100 grams or about half a cup of water, and an 1/8 teaspoon of yeast. If you wanted to do this with sourdough, drop back the flour and water and replace that with starter. Scale the amount of starter depending on the temperature of your home and how long you want the pre-ferment to sit. A good starting point would be to use about 30 grams of starter, 125 grams of flour, and 100 grams of water to go overnight. I am going to get this stirred up really well and put it in a warm place for about 12 to 13 hours to double. I have the recipe in the show notes with both weight and cup measurements. Do take into account that I do the shovel and scoop with my flour, so my cups are on the heavy side. I am putting 350 grams or about 3 cups of flour in the bowl of my stand mixer. Including the 150 grams of flour or 1 cup from the Poolish, there should be 500 grams total or about 4 cups. If you are not weighing your ingredients, start with less flour and add enough to make a soft dough. The recipe in the show notes will have extra details to try to make sure this is clear. To the flour, I am adding in 15 grams or 1 tablespoon of sugar. You can substitute honey if you want a different flavor profile, and about 7 grams or a scant teaspoon of salt. I want to give that a quick mix before adding in my wet ingredients. I am using a stand mixer as I will be adding in butter after I have developed the gluten. If you want to do this by hand, I suggest adding in very soft butter with the wet ingredients, as it will make your life much easier. Trying to add in the butter after you have developed the gluten can be very messy when doing it by hand. Don't ask me how I know. This is what my Poolish looks like. It has doubled nicely in about 13 hours. I want to add in my Poolish and another 1/8 teaspoon of yeast. You can add in more yeast if you want the next part to go faster. And 200 grams or about 3/4 of a cup of milk. You can also use buttermilk here too. I sometimes add buttermilk powder with my dry ingredients, then add in the appropriate amount of water. Adding in the milk, butter, and sugar makes this an enriched dough. The fat, dairy, or sugar gives the bread a softer feel, richer flavor, and a more tender crumb, lending it a softer, fluffier texture. Side note, my kids love this bread because of that fluffy texture. What I am looking for, other than allowing the stand mixer to go for about 10 minutes, is for the dough to become smooth and to pull away cleanly from the sides. The dough should feel a little tacky, but not super sticky, nor should it be stiff and dry to the touch. I am letting the stand mixer work the dough until I get close to passing the window pane test. The window pane test means that I can gently stretch out the dough almost enough to see through it without it breaking. Once I feel that the dough has developed its gluten, I want to add the butter slowly. This recipe can take anywhere from 1 to 3 tablespoons up to 40 grams of butter. If you want to add more, that will get you into a brioche-like bread. Once I have added in all the butter, I want to give the butter time to incorporate into the dough. I do want to make sure I am scraping down the sides of the butter, as sometimes a small pat will get missed. In total, I let the dough mix another 3 to 4 minutes. This soft dough turns into a really nice velvety, supple dough after the butter. Butter, or fat in general, can make it harder for the gluten to form. The fat tends to protect the gluten proteins from rehydrating properly and forming that nice stretchy dough we want for bread making. Adding butter at the end means the gluten has already formed and we are not fighting an uphill battle. For me, this recipe came about when I was worried about getting yeast for bread making, but before I started my sourdough starter. This is a great method for stretching out yeast as it uses a quarter of what the recipe calls for. This recipe is my grandmother's recipe for white bread. That's literally what she called it, white bread. She would put in a pinch of ginger, but it was never written down. The ginger adds a little something, but nothing you can place. Feel free to add in a pinch of powdered ginger if you wish. I am getting a great stretch here, and this is really what I am looking for. If you like deep dive recipes like this one, don't forget to subscribe. I walk through each step so you can bake with confidence, whether you're using yeast or sourdough. I want to remove it from the stand mixer and place it into a lightly greased bowl to allow it to proof. I cover my bowl with a wet tea towel. This is to keep the dough from drying out. I want to let this go until doubled. For me, that ended up being about 3 hours in my oven as a proofer at about 100 Fahrenheit or 38 Celsius. This is where the dough is after doubling for me. This might not be fully doubled, but it is close enough. I want to get some flour on the top as well as on the counter to prevent sticking. I turn this out and press it into a large rectangle. I want to let her fold the sides in, then roll and press the dough into a nice tight log. I do tighten the surface by pushing the dough around, helping create a nice taut surface as well as sealing the seam on the bottom and sides. I am placing the dough into a greased loaf pan, seam side down. I cover this with the same damp towel I used to cover the bowl. I want this to rise to about 1 inch above the top of the loaf pan. This is the benchmark for this particular size loaf pan and this amount of dough. Your mileage may vary depending on your size of loaf pan. For me, that took about 2 hours in a warm oven, but definitely keep an eye on it to avoid large holes or collapsing. Here is the dough nicely proofed to just above the rim of the loaf pan. I want to score the top and get this covered in foil. Scoring improves the appearance of the loaf, preventing it from exploding out the side. The foil helps trap steam in and allow for a nice oven spring. Both of these are optional, but worth trying to see if this yields a crust you prefer or not. This is going into a 375 Fahrenheit or 190 Celsius oven for 45 minutes. I use temperature to check for doneness. An enriched loaf should be over 200 degrees, about 93 Celsius, when fully cooked. If you prefer a darker crust, you will easily go over the minimum doneness temperature. If you have seen my sourdough video, this is the same foil technique I use with sourdough. In fact, I love the softer crust I get using foil that I do that with all my loaves now. Everyone in the family prefers soft crust. Spreading a little butter on top will also help achieve a softer crust after baking, as will wrapping in the same damp tea towel. I do remove the foil about 3 to 5 minutes before the timer goes off, just for a little browning. Here is the loaf, and because I wrapped the loaf, it has a nice soft crust. Obviously, if you prefer a crunchier crust, feel free to remove the foil earlier and skip wrapping with a towel. The bread is nice and fluffy but still has structure. I am having no problems cutting this bread into slices. They hold up nicely, and this has a lovely butter flavor to it. This is a great sandwich loaf, pairs nicely with spreadable butter, and would also make great Texas toast garlic bread. If you haven't seen my garlic bread video, check it out here, and thanks for watching.